Hey everyone, Disappointed Giant here. While Dead Cells is clearly my roguelite of choice, there's a handful of other games that I've really enjoyed over the years that I've wanted to cover at some point on the channel. One of them is Hades, which I featured in a Dead Cells crossover video a while back. But the main one that I've been thinking about is Returnal. This game has haunted me for years and still hasn't let me go. In this video, I'm going to break down and explain some of Returnal's fundamental mechanics to help you better understand the game's systems. I'll also share some extra tips and strategies to help you get more successful runs. Similar to my Dead Cells beginner's guide, I'm not going to go into the thick of it with how specific weapons work or give strategies on how to defeat the game's brutal bosses. I feel that the Returnal experience is at its best when you don't know what to expect around the corner, but you feel confident that you have the tools to handle whatever awaits. The former is for you to experience, and the latter is for me to help you with. I'm only going to be showing footage from the overgrown ruins in this video, which is the game's first biome. While Returnal both expands outward and collapses in on itself as the game goes on, the mechanics and strategies I'm going to present here can be applied anywhere in the game, from the first level to its final. Each of Returnal's environments are a sight to behold, and in my opinion, anything that happens past the overgrown ruins should be experienced firsthand without me yapping about it. I'm also not going to cover the free Tower of Sisyphus DLC in this video, but I highly recommend playing through that self-contained tower after you've completed the full game because it is so much fun. So with that out of the way, let's stuff our pockets full of Silphium, charge our Altfire Augment, and venture forth into the ruins of Atropos. At its core, Returnal is a roguelite, but it also leads into some other genres, most notably a third-person shooter with bullet hell elements. When you lose a run, you'll end up back at the beginning of the game without any of your gear other than your basic pistol. Unlike Dead Cells, there isn't measurable character progression to help make your runs more consistent. There's no equivalent to gold reserves or flash charges to help turn the tides in your favor, so Returnal can feel pretty brutal at times. In my opinion, the first biome is consistently one of the toughest since your resources are at their lowest, so don't get discouraged if you end up losing a lot of your runs early on. This is part of the game's learning curve and is something that I really struggled with at first too. When I get discouraged playing Dead Cells, I can drop the difficulty down or turn on custom mode and have a fun run, but there's nothing of the sort here. The only way out in Returnal is through. Before we get into the actual game mechanics, there's a few control settings that I recommend checking out. First off, I set sprint to always. There's a lot happening in this game that often requires you to weave in and out of waves of enemy groups and their projectiles, so the last thing that you want to do is to manually toggle your run speed. Auto aim is set to medium by default, but you can turn this down or up if you'd like. If you're just getting started, I recommend medium as the minimum, but would lean more towards turning it up to high. You can also change your reticle to a larger size for better visibility, and you can choose what information you want to be displayed on your HUD. Lastly, I use the classic controls preset and I map dash to R1. I find that it's easier to dash and jump simultaneously this way since one action's on a trigger and another's on a face button. If something doesn't feel quite right for you with either the default controls or what I'm recommending here, then don't be afraid to move some things around until you feel more comfortable, since it's crucial to be able to play as smoothly as possible. Returnal's levels are procedurally generated with a series of interconnecting rooms. Similar to Hades, instead of having smaller pieces of tile sets that come together to make an area, the entire room is designed as a single piece. As you get more comfortable with the game, you'll start to recognize rooms and know where all their secrets are. As you explore, you'll notice that there's two types of doors on your map. One's a green rectangle and the other one's a blue triangle. The critical path through the level is always going to be through the green doors. If you're looking to make your way through the biome as quickly as possible, you can stick to those and then skip the optional doors as you mosey on towards the boss. Since pickups and health are really important, I personally recommend doing full clears if you're able to, including going through all of the unlocked available side areas even if they're off the beaten path. You never know when a blue door might have a healing bed or an artifact that could change the course of your run. In addition to showing you the path through the biomes, the on-screen map also shows a ton of useful information at a glance. I'll go over these more in detail as the guide goes on, but some of the more helpful things to keep an eye out for are the green plus signs, which are health pickups, white chest icons, which may contain new weapons, and yellow diamonds, which are obolites, Returnal's gold currency. You can open the menu to get a more detailed look at the map, including being able to scan through other rooms you've already been through, as well as moving the map around and zooming in and out. Exploration and pickups are crucial parts of Returnal's gameplay experience, but the main focus of the gameplay revolves around the various types of weapons that you'll find. Before you leave the first biome, you'll end up finding the Tachymatic Carbine, which is roughly Returnal's equivalent of a machine gun, and the Spitmaw Blaster, which approximates a shotgun. I'm using the words roughly and approximates because these guns will change and shift as you earn more weapon traits. Similar to Hades' Daedalus hammers, weapon traits will take the base idea of a gun and make some kind of modification to it to have it operate differently. For example, the carbine has a fast cadence of shooting bullets, but you may find one that has the high caliber trait, which makes the bullets slower but they do more damage. On the other side of things, you might see rising pitch, which makes the gun have an increased rate of fire the longer that you hold down the trigger. Unlocking as many weapon traits as possible on as many guns as possible is the most important piece of advice in this entire guide. In my opinion, outside of learning enemy patterns, nothing will help you progress more than this. Some of the traits may seem less helpful than others, like the Wide Maw upgrade for the Spitmaw Blaster, which will spread out the spray of the gun, but you should unlock them all. When a gun has a trait that can be unlocked, you'll see the name of the trait along with an empty progress bar that says 0%. Each trait has 3 levels to it and will be even more powerful at higher levels. To unlock the first level, you need to kill 15 enemies with that gun, 50 enemies for level 2, and 100 for level 3. The trait system is built to give you more chances for more options early on since it has such a low kill requirement for level 1, and it's meant to expand as your experience with Returnal gets deeper. The best way to play Returnal is to get as many traits leveled as possible as quickly as possible. This will require you to change guns frequently as the game does a really good job of giving you lots of options for weapons as you go through each biome. If you have a gun that has no traits you can level up and you find one that has a new trait, I recommend picking up that new gun and using it until that trait is unlocked. Repeat the process as new guns arrive and you'll build up quite the arsenal. Another thing this method of weapon management does is it forces you to get comfortable with every gun in the game. Each gun has its own pros and cons, and each has 9 possible traits that can be unlocked, so the more experience you have with each one, the better your experience will be. And the more traits you have on your guns, the more damage and utility you'll have at your disposal, which will help you get even further into the game. Early on, there will be guns that you prefer over other ones, but every single gun can be an absolute powerhouse with the right combination of traits. At some point in the first biome, you'll also unlock a melee attack, which doesn't have any traits tied to it, but it is super powerful. When you use it, it moves you towards the nearest enemy, and it provides Celine with some iframes during the attack. I recommend using the melee attack liberally with nearby enemies and especially turrets. In addition to having weapon traits, each gun will have a level to it, indicated by the large number on its stat screen. In the screenshot I'm showing here, you can see that the Spitmaw has a level 2 and the pistol has a level 3. Toward the bottom, you can see 3 different affixes that have a bunch of squares next to them. The level of the gun shows the amount of points, shown as squares, that can go into those affixes, and their spread is completely random. Each particular weapon has its own 3 affixes, so Spitmaw will always show bonus damage, range, and stagger as part of that section, and the sidearm will always show damage, overload, and fire rate. In this example, the level 2 Spitmaw has 1 point in damage and stagger, and the level 3 pistol has 1 point in damage and 2 in fire rate. You may find another level 3 pistol at some point that has 3 points in overload projectiles, or maybe you'll see one that has a single point in each stat. A gun's level also dictates how many traits it can have, so a weapon between levels 0 and 4 will have 1 trait, between 5 and 9 can have 2 traits, and so on. So what dictates a weapon's level and the amount of weapon traits that can be available? That would be something called proficiency, which can be looked at as something like experience points. You'll see your proficiency level on the bottom left of the screen as the white bar with the star next to it. The more enemies you kill, the more that bar fills. Once it hits the max, it will level up and you'll start filling the bar for the next level. You can also increase your proficiency through picking up broken calibrators spread throughout the levels. These are one of the kinds of items that will show up on your map as a green triangle. That number is roughly equivalent to the level of guns you find, so if you're at proficiency level 2, you'll mostly find guns that are also level 2. I say roughly because there's a chance you'll find a gun that has a higher weapon level than your proficiency level. You'll be able to differentiate these because their item number is going to be orange instead of green. This is kind of like finding an S level item in Dead Cells when your forge only has the ++ level maxed. And now that I've met my forge quota for the video, we can move on. There are 2 other things I want to mention about weapons before we talk about some of the other systems in the game. The first is the gun's alternate fire, which is a powerful attack that can be used once and then it goes on a cooldown. In addition to having each individual weapon pickup have random traits and a weapon level with points randomly distributed into its affixes, each gun will also have a random alt fire that changes from gun to gun. In the screenshot we already looked at, you can see that both guns have the blast shell alt fire. This is just a coincidence as there's about a dozen or so alt fires that guns can have. And if that weren't enough randomness and combinations for you, you can also level up an alt fire trait on a weapon. If you have to choose between leveling up a trait and leveling up an alt fire, you should always prioritize the trait since alt fires are not as important as building up weapon traits. The second thing I want to mention is something called Overload, which is Returnal's equivalent to the Gears of War active reload. After you run out of bullets, the gun will start to reload, which will bring up a little meter that has a larger section in the middle. This section here is the overload. If you press the shoot button while the reload line is in the overload section, you'll get a bonus of more bullets and more damage from your next clip. If you miss, you won't be able to shoot again until the reload line moves all the way to the right side of the meter, so it's best to hit the overload as much as possible. As if you didn't have enough things to keep track of already. So to wrap up the weapon discussion, here's a quick refresher. 1. If you see a gun with a locked trait, pick it up and unlock the trait. 2. Your proficiency level dictates the level of the weapons you find, so the more enemies you kill, the better guns you'll find. 3. Uploading an alt fire level is good, but not as important as unlocking or upgrading traits. And 4. Try to reload when the thing is in the other thing. Another combat-related system in Returnal is the adrenaline mechanic, which you can monitor by looking at the number under the heartbeat at the bottom of the screen. Whenever you kill 3 enemies without getting hit, you gain an adrenaline level, all the way up to level 5. Each level grants Celine a temporary bonus that persists until you take a hit, at which point the level drops back to 0 and the cycle starts again. In any game like this, the goal is to get hit as little as possible, but it's even more important in Returnal since these perks can make combat feel so much smoother. The first adrenaline level grants enhanced overload, so the window for hitting overload during a reload is about twice as large. Level 2 lets you see enemy shapes through walls, and Level 3 grants you enhanced melee damage. Level 4 gives you an extra 50% proficiency from kills, and Level 5 grants you 50% more obolites. When you max out your adrenaline meter at Level 5, you also get a shield that will absorb 1 hit, which effectively keeps your adrenaline at max for a bit longer if you take some damage. There's a nice little loop here that rewards you for playing cleanly since the perks will add up to a more aggressive and offensive combat experience. Speaking of systems that reward you for playing cleanly, the healing and max life systems in Returnal can initially feel punishing and counterintuitive. There are 2 types of life-related pickups you can find on Atropos. One is Silphium, which is one of the game's main ways to heal, and the other is Silphium Resin, which will increase your max hit points when you pick up 3 of them. So here's what I mean when I said counterintuitive. When you're missing health, most of the Silphium you'll see will be of the healing kind, which comes in 3 sizes: small, regular, and large. You may occasionally find resin, but the chances of it showing up are lower when you're not at full health. However, when you are at full health, every piece of Silphium on the map turns into resin, so the less you get hit, the more max health you'll have. You'll be able to see how many resins you currently have by looking at the meter to the left of your health bar. Once all 3 slots are filled up, you gain some more max hit points, and then the meter clears so you can fill it with more resin. I personally don't love how this is set up, since players will get hit a lot early on, which means that the Silphium they find will heal, but it won't give them higher max HP. As I mentioned, starting Returnal for the first time can be a brutal experience, but the more you master Returnal systems, the more benefits you'll receive from them. As you explore, you'll come across chests, Silphium, or obolites that are purple and malignant. If you open a malignant chest, pick up the Silphium, or break the obolites, there's a chance that you'll get a malfunction from it. Malfunctions are various effects that will have a negative consequence on your run, such as enemies leaving behind pools of acid or your max HP being lowered. There's a condition to clear the malfunction, and generally the earlier in the game you are, the less challenging the clear conditions are. You may need to kill 6 enemies using melee attacks, or collect 200 obolites. Once the condition is cleared, the malfunction is removed. My strategy when it comes to taking malignant items depends on where I'm at in my run and how my build is looking. I will liberally break malignant obolites early in a run, since money is really important in the first couple of biomes, and both the malfunction effects and their clear conditions are generally manageable. The same thing goes for finding malignant healing items if I'm really low on health. The worst thing that could happen is I lose the run, which may end up happening anyway if I already have 1 foot in the grave. One thing I don't recommend doing is opening malignant chests, as the items in there usually aren't worth the risk. In my opinion, unless your build is in shambles and you're desperate for something to try to save a run, I would avoid opening malignant chests. Malignant items also have an option to cleanse them using a resource called Ether, which are represented with pink symbols on the map. Ether is found sporadically while exploring, and you'll also receive 5 Ether after beating a boss. Ether's purpose is twofold. The first is that you can use some of it to cleanse malignant items. If you have some in your inventory and you can afford to spend a few, you'll be able to get a clean item without needing to worry about malfunctions. Your Ether caps at 30, so I'll generally use it to clean items as I get closer to that cap, since it's a use it or lose it situation. An arguably more important purpose for Ether is to permanently unlock new items for the item pool. There's an obelisk near the crash site that's called Cathonos, which is where you can spend Ether to unlock a random item, which could be something like a consumable or a suit artifact. This is the rough equivalent of spending cells at the collector to unlock a blueprint. You can only unlock 1 item per run, and the item costs increase with every few unlocks up to a maximum of 15 Ether. This is where I recommend spending most of your Ether, since adding new items to the pool will give you a better chance of finding something interesting or helpful in your runs. For me, I keep an eye on how much the unlocks cost and will make sure that when I finish a run, I have at least that many Ether left in my inventory so I can buy something new at the beginning of the next run. I recommend finding a balance between saving as much Ether as you can for new unlocks, but also giving yourself some leeway in case you need to clean some Silphium or another item in a pinch. So I've mentioned artifacts twice so far, and I want to make sure I take some time to explain what those are. Some artifacts are items that have a passive effect on gameplay. For example, there's Phantom Limb, which gives you a 10% chance of healing after killing an enemy, or the Golden Coil, which gives you extra weapon damage based on how many obolites you have. There are also suit artifacts, which generally grant different types of active combat abilities. There's the Recharging Overload suit artifact, which reduces your alt-fire recharge by 3 seconds with each successful override. And there's the Integrity Circuit, which increases your max health whenever you gain or remove a malfunction. You can carry a total of 15 artifacts at one time, which can be seen in detail in your equipment menu. To me, artifacts are kinda like Dead Cells' mutations, as they're things that you add to your build that aren't items and they're not weapons, but you can use them to affect how your run will go. I pick up every artifact that I find since they all have some kind of positive impact on my build. Also, the red lock chests will always have some kind of artifact in them, so if you have any extra keys, opening those chests are usually worth it. Another way to get items is to buy them from shops, which are called Fabricators here. Every biome has a set Fabricator location that always has the same room generation, so you'll know when you come across them. There are 2 items I recommend purchasing as often as you can. The first is the astronaut figure, which gives you an extra chance when you die in a run, so it's kinda like YOLO. The second is the health fabricator that will add 25% max HP to your health bar. Even if you have enough money to buy the health when you first see it, I recommend waiting until after you clear the biome, since your max HP will likely be higher at that point, so you'll be getting more value out of the upgrade. You can also buy and find various consumables as you play. You start the game with 1 consumable slot, so you'll want to be deliberate with what you have in that slot. For example, if you have an alt-fire recharge in your slot and you find a Silphium vial, you're generally better off taking the healing and leaving the alt-fire recharge behind. Any items that you leave on the map will remain there until you go to the next biome, so you can always go back for pickups. The downside to that is these all have the same triangle icon on the map, so it can get pretty cluttered pretty quickly. It's not worth retreading half a map to pick up some shocking springs, but if there's a health kit or something else that's useful, then it might be worth the extra legwork. The rest of the video is going to talk about several disconnected items and mechanics, so I'm just going to go through these one by one to make sure that we cover them. The first are Parasites, which permanently bond to your suit when you pick them up. They always have 1 positive effect and 1 negative effect, similar to the Chaos Boons in Hades. As you start to get more familiar with Parasites, you'll find the effects that fit within your style of gameplay. There are some real stinkers in here though, so I don't ever recommend picking up a Parasite that has Constricting, which damages you every time you pick up an item, including health pickups. Caustic, which makes enemies leave pools of acid behind after death and can cause you to lose your adrenaline level. Or Sluggish, which will severely increase your melee and dash cooldown. I do recommend being more lenient when picking up a Parasite that has Distracting, which decreases your proficiency gain, or Destabilizing, which makes dropped Obolites disappear 1 second sooner, since both of those effects are fairly negligible. The other negative effects are generally case by case. There are lots of positive Parasite effects, including one that detaches on death and brings you back to life. Pair this with the aforementioned astronaut figure and you'll basically have 2 extra lives, which can really carry a run. Speaking of extra lives, as you're exploring Atropos, you're bound to come across a gargantuan structure called a Reconstructor. These devices cost 6 ether and will revive you in that room with all of your gears and items if you die in that biome. It's important to know that these are only effective for the biome you're currently in. So if you spend 6 ether at the Reconstructor in the overgrown ruins, clear the biome, and then die in a later biome, you will not be resurrected. Since these are relatively expensive and are only a single biome, single-use mechanic, I recommend only using a Reconstructor if you're on pace to clear a new biome or you're facing a boss that you've been having trouble with, so you can make sure that you have an extra shot if things go off the rails. Alongside Reconstructors, Fabricators, and Parasites, you may also find something called a Datacube. The best way to describe these is to compare them to blueprints in Dead Cells, since their mechanics are similar. If you die holding a Datacube, you lose it and you need to pick it up again the next time that you see it. When you have a Datacube, you'll need to find a Datacube repository to put it in so you can manufacture the item. There are 18 of these in total, and they aren't necessary for game or meta progression, but some of the items they unlock can be really useful, so make sure you keep your eye out for them. Something else you'll want to keep your eye out for are red doors that are covered with tentacles. These doors go into challenge rooms, which are optional areas where you'll face 3 waves of enemies. There is 1 challenge room in each biome, and they spawn in every level generation, so you'll always be able to access them if you'd like. To me, these are high-risk, medium-reward rooms. I generally only recommend taking them towards the end of a biome if you have a strong build and you're confident that you'll be able to clear out the enemies and mini-boss without much trouble. There's one final mechanic that I want to mention, and these are the house sequences. You'll find the house key somewhere in the first biome, which will unlock the front door to the house. There are a set amount of these sequences, and each one becomes available after reaching a certain point in the game. The one important piece of advice I want to give here is to keep an eye out for the little blocks on the floor. Each sequence has one block somewhere, and sometimes their appearance is tied to interacting with something else in the house. When you first get into the house, I recommend doing a full search for the block, and if you don't see it, interact with items nearby and then do another loop. These blocks unlock artifacts that are generally pretty good, but they also have some kind of thematic tie to the story, so they're worth picking up. If you don't find a block before the sequence is over, you'll still be able to get the item, but it may be in a chest or in the Canthonos, so it could take some extra time to find and unlock. So there we have it. I know that there was a lot of information in this guide, so hopefully the manner and order in which I presented things made sense and wasn't too overwhelming. There's a lot of things to remember both when zooming out and looking at a run holistically, as well as during those granular moments when you're going from room to room. While Returnal can be obtuse, overbearing, and incredibly frustrating, it is one of the most rewarding gaming experiences I've ever had, and it continues to stay with me more than 3 years after I first played it. If you love Returnal, I hope you also love this guide, and if you're new to the game or are just curious about it, I hope that this video sheds some light on all of its interlocking pieces. Leave a comment below if you want to share your Returnal experience or want any clarifications or more info about anything that I touched on during the guide. I hope this video helps you break the cycle. As always, thank you for watching, and good luck out there.